are the students of economic sociology, which is taught by Professor Prashant Bansode. We got the opportunity to go on a field trip to Goa to study for the tribal diversity and the tribes of Goa and the problems faced by them. Um, I would like to welcome Professor Prashant Bansode to give us some opening remarks.
So thank you, Tejas. Uh, so this field trip, is part of the internal assessment of the students of economic sociology and even of social exclusion and inclusive policy, which each year I do it as an activity of internal assessment. So for this time, it was an 15 marks, test for the students for doing this field trip and the field study. So for this course, we have 70 students, and out of 70 students, 40 students has opted for the field trip. While I have given the literature for the field trip to all of the students, 70 students, some common literature to all of the students, and very specific literature to students coming for the field trip to Goa. So it is part of the economic sociology module one last module called as sociocultural aspects of economic development. So it is scheduled tribes economic development we are trying to look at in the last module, also of scheduled caste, but especially we did a case study of scheduled tribes and their development status as far as their specificity of social and cultural distinction with the general population is concerned. So the one of the module is being covered under this, and the literature was given to students 10 to 15 days before we go for the field trip. And this literature constitutes about the research articles, the government reports. So it was common literature was on scheduled tribes economy, then socio-economic development status, government reports and articles which I have shared to all 70 students, and some specific on issues of Goa's tribal development status. So I have made five groups. Those who have come for the field trip, approximately eight students in each groups, and we had five thematic groups on which they were to do some kind of observations on the given theme. So the themes were disparity among tribes of Goa, economy, then socio-economic conditions, contemporary issues of tribes, then TSP and the livelihood issues. So we have these five thematic groups, and students coordinated amongst themselves and studied the literature and also a 2 day observations in the field. So the 2 day observations in the field are just a cursory view of what is there in terms of such a big issue of navigating Goa's tribal diversity to talk about. But this is just what you can say is a bird's eye view about it's just a reflection of 2 days on what students has observed. And one important thing here is how the question about tribal development is we have seen in the country, and different tribal movements talk in terms of the critique of the development paradigm of the state. So we have also seen some kind of echoes of critique of the development paradigm of the state in country. So I'll not take much more time. So these are the team leaders as well as those who have volunteered themselves to speak on this issue. So I don't want to impose myself on them. So it is all their own reflections and explorations what they have done in just 2 days. So it is over to Tejas and the team. Thank you.
Now we went to Goa, and so basically we usually relate Goa with tourism. Now we went to a different part of the Goa. We were studying for the tribes. We listened to a lot of people. We met a lot of political leaders. However, when we talk about the tribes, let us first know who the tribes are, where they came from. So, firstly, the tribal history of Goa. So, a few centuries ago, a few people migrated from the Chota Nagpur plateau of the Madhya Pradesh to the Goa place. Out of this, a lot of people settled on the basins of the like the river Mandovi. Now, these people were called the Gaudas because they formed a Gau system, which was called the Gaukari system, where like in terms of how Poliani explained that there is a system of mechanical, like how Durkheim explained about the mechanical society and how Poliani explained the workings of this kind of a tribal village. These Gaudas also started a settlement where the Gaukari system was placed, where all the there was a mand system in between. The gaos were distributed along the mand. There would be a administrative head of the mand system who would be called a budwant or a gaukari with respect to different places. Now this budwant would have the power over the distribution of land and all of it. There was no particular distribution of land, and the cultivation was done together by all of the people in the society. Now out of that there would be uh, there were a religious head also in this. So in usually when we study sociology, we learned that there would always be in this tribal societies an administrative head and a religional head. So the administrative head here would be the budon, and the religional head would be the velip or um, the velips or the kunbes here. So the Zalmis, when the first day we met, we also learned it through. So we learned about the history of the tribal Goa, not just from the literature, because it's most in the folk songs of the Goa. It's in the folk tales of Goa. So we learned that the Gauda settled in the tribal areas, after which a few of them migrated to other hinterlands. So they started producing using a technique called shifting cultivation, which they would call kumeri. Also, the process would be called kurwadi, out of which the names came out to be Kunvi. However, the name today is spelled as Kunbi, which is also a tribe in Maharashtra, but it's different. It's called Kurmi in the Goa. So these Kurmis basically had two types. One of them was the religious people, and the other were the administrative people, the people who would cultivate. So the religious heads would be called Veribs. Um so after that there was some kind of disagreements, or there would be some kind of hatred towards the Gauka, so they started to take the names of Arabs. After this there was the arrival of the Portuguese in 1510, when Alfonso de Albuquerque arrived at Goa, and then the Portuguese saw the opportunity to take rent from this Mand system. So the tribals did not really believe in the system of getting profits from the cultivation. They only believed in the system of self-sustenance. When the Portuguese came, they saw that there is a scope of fetching rents from these people. So they converted the mans into comunidades, and through the system of comunidades, they also got the profit of converting the people as the majority. They wanted a majority of the people in that place, so they started converting the Gaudas. Who, when the Portuguese came, they came to the coast. So the first people they met were the Gaudas, and they started to convert the Gaudas to uh, forcefully. We could say we saw a story of. It was a story which we cannot really say we believe, but it is said to be true by a lot of tribals, where they said that the Portuguese used to throw a piece of bread or a paws in the wells, like the community wells, and they would say that the people are polluted and now they are Christians. So the people were converted into Catholics in that way. So, and the people did not really resist against them. So a lot of the Gaudas converted into Catholic Gaudas, and some of them were Hindu Gaudas. After that, the Kurmis and the Veribs used to stay in the hinterlands, so not a lot of them were converted into Catholics. The Gaudas were converted mostly. After that, when the before the Portuguese left, there was some kind of uh, a change in the system. Now that the Portuguese was leaving, there was a story of man coming from Pune who went to Goa and started converting people back to Hindu. So now these people who reconverted themselves from Catholics to Hindu were called the Nava Hindu people. Nava Hindu Gaudas. So there were now three types of Gaudas, just that one of them were the original Konkan Gaudas, there were the Catholic Gaudas, and the Nava Hindu Gaudas, and then there were Kunbis and Velips. Um, so this was the story of how the tribal settlements in the Goa started. Now we'll go further with how we planned our two-day trip and who all we met and how did we proceed.
So like I'll be quickly briefing about how our trip went like. So like we on the day one we headed towards Adkolna village where we met a tribal representative, Mr. Sadanand Zalmi, who briefed us about a village. He was like a religious representative about that village. He discussed about the situation of the village and very highlighted upon improving the creation of more and more public infrastructure or a public washrooms. And he also highlighted upon the problem of unemployment which people from that village were actually facing. The place was a Mand village, and culturally, he showed us a place where all of our tribal women dress up and celebrate a common women festival, which is called as a Dipotsav. Later to that day, we headed towards a tribal representative, Sadanand Gowda, who was a religious folklore singer and he was also a conveyor for the government of tribal population. He has been like a committee member for various authorities for the Forest Rights Act and various stuff for the property rights as well. Then in the evening, we had a discussion with Govind Sirodkar, who is a director, artist, and also a tribal activist as well. So his major focus was on his importance of all of those political agitations and all of those activist role which played an important role for granting a special status for the scheduled tribes at Goa in 2003. Then he also focused on how various important sources of journalism played an important role in his agitation. Further, with our second day in the morning, we met Mr. Anand Velip, who showed us the place which government allocated for the Kunbi saris. So here's a place which was inaugurated just 2 months ago, and we can very well see the situation what it is in today. So basically, this was a place where various Kunbi saris used to get manufactured, and this was the condition of that place. Further, then we proceeded towards the Tribal Research Institute at Sangam Taluka, Goa, where we had an interaction with like various administrative officers and various program officers from the Disha Foundation as well. Disha Foundation was one of those organizations who played a major role for the tribal people out there. We then were briefed by Mr. Devidas Bade, who is a journalist and a reporter, about the history and the tribals of the Goa. He highlighted upon various struggles tribes even face today, and further we after that further we proceeded towards a very small village where we met a tribal man where we observed the various tribal settlements into various hilly areas where we observed like a set pieces of like various mud houses and the old techniques of irrigation facilities and old techniques of cooking facilities as well. Then we, after later to that day, then we met one of those renowned advocates of Goa, Mr. Joao Fernandez, who talked us about the Adivasi Sangatna of KEPM, and he further also highlighted upon like various cultural as well as social differences between various tribes of Goa. So we are actually grateful towards all of our interactions with our tribal representatives and activists of Goa who guided us through the trip and highlighted upon all the tribal struggles of the Goa. I'm Bhavika, and I will be talking about. I'll be giving a brief history of the fight for tribal status in Goa. So, post liberation of Goa, the three main dominant tribes that we studied, that is the Gaudas, the Velips, and the Kunbis. They weren't reserved under any category, but since they faced discrimination, they fought for uh, OBC status. So in 1984, the Goan Organizing Association was formed, and therefore the state government included the Gaudas, Kunbis, and Velips in the list of OBCs. However, after categorizing them into the OBCs, their conditions further worsened because there were other dominant OBC in the community who had the opinion that if they are fighting for reservation, then why not us? And they took up majority of the reserve posts in education and government sector and all. So so after that they started to fight for the ST status, and from the period of 1998 to 2001 their struggle intensified. They went on a hunger strike and they gave an ultimatum to the government. Gakuved, which is Gowda, Kunbis, Velips, and Dhangars, this organization
or Sangathan was formed, and on behalf of Gakuvet, a proposal was sent to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha in 2001, and a petition was filed for inclusion of Gaudas, Velips, and Kunbis and Dhangars in the ST category list. And post this, the parliamentary committees visited Goa, and in 2002, the SC and ST amendment bill was passed, and in 2003, the president gave assent to the bill. So, in 2003, Gaudas, Velips, and Kunbis were notified as STs, but the Dhangars still did not get the ST status. So even when they were OBCs, about 30% of the population was OBCs at the time, but then also the reservation and education was only 2%. So we still, after like 22 years of them getting the ST status, we still see that the reservation that they should be getting in the government sector and the education sector is not in proportion to their actual population, which is about 10.23% of the state population of Goa. So in in 2004, the United Tribals Association was formed to tell the government, to pressurize the government to implement solutions. Mr. Govind Sherotkar told us that they got a lot of media support, and it was actually the Goan media, which pressurized the government to bring in these reforms for the ST community. Now, in 2011, a massive protest was organized in South Goa, and the two tribal rights activists were actually murdered. Their cashew godams were set on fire. So after that, at that time the Congress was in power. So after that, the ruling opposition party, the BJP and the RSS joined hands with some Adivasi community students, and they started to plan this movement to gain power in the state. Now, what Mr. Govind Shirodkar pointed out was that a lot of these people fighting for rights aren't really aware what reservation stands for. So they were brainwashed into thinking, and in 2012, the BJP came in power, and yet nothing, their conditions did not change. In 2013, the President of India promulgated an ordinance titled Readjustment and Reorientation of SC and ST in Parliamentary and Assembly Constituencies Ordinance. So, under this ordinance, about 6 to 7 states got political reservation, and the Election Commission of India started the process to give political reservation to the STs of Goa also, but the state government did not follow up and with the implementation of the ordinance, and so the ECI failed to notify the ordinance for Goa, and hence these three communities couldn't get political reservation. So they were very critical of the BJP government at that time, because they could have gotten them the political reservation that they are demanding in the state legislative assembly of Goa, which is 4 seats in the 40 as seats in the state legislative assembly, which is 10% of their population. But that did not come about. So instead, the four constituencies where the three communities are in dominance were Priol, Newham, Sangwem, and Kepim. But instead, the government decided to did not give a seat to them in any of these four constituencies. So their protests have intensified post them. They have the Gakuved and other ST organizations have come together and given the government ultimatums that they would boycott the Lok Sabha elections if they do not get the reservation. And it was only last year in May that the state tribal department recommended reserving 4 seats for STs in Goa by constituting a delimitation commission based on the 2011 survey census. Sorry, and in and but the thing is that because the delimitation commission hasn't the process hasn't started yet, so they are worried that in 2027 when the assembly elections will come about in Goa, they will still not get the political reservation they have been fighting for, because for them to get the reservation by 2027, the ordinance in the Lok Sabha should have been passed by now, but that hasn't come about. So they have protested outside the Vidhan Sabha. The mission for political reservation was set up in 2022 to pressurize the government into giving them the political reservation they've been fighting for. And yeah, so briefly, what he wanted to say was that they're trying to constitute a delimitation commission before 2024 Lok Sabha polls.
My name is Tanya Chaudhary. Now I'll be linking all these the things that we have talked about. the agitations, the history, all of this, and then we are now looking at the issues that contemporarily exists for the tribals, right? Now, for me, what I could understand was all of the issues are linked to the land rights issue. Going back to the history of tribals and harking back to what Teja said, uh, tribals were actually very much subsistence oriented, like very it was a framework that Karl Polanyi has introduced. So they were very much concentrated in this agricultural rich lands and the hinterlands as well, and they were only farming for their own subsistence. So they were practicing shifting agriculture, they were practicing khazan agriculture, which is reclaiming the land back from like the salty water and farming on those lands. So these are the kind of agricultures they were practicing, and only trading for necessities with the outsiders. So what happened is when Portuguese conquered, when Portuguese they conquered Goa, what happens is that they converted a lot of people into Christianity, and this included both the tribals and the affluent classes. The Portuguese also recognized, as they just said, that the mand system is actually something that could generate them a lot of revenue. So recognizing this, they then codified that land structure, because these people did not have any recognized individual rights for the land, right? So they codified this structure into something called as comunidad system. Now in this comunidad system, the land belonged, the whole land, which was a community land that as tribals recognized, this land came to the government. Now this is now owned by the government, and they have given the rights to the people to farm on these lands. So this becomes a comunidad system, and this is something that is still followed now. The first village that we went to, Khariabat, Alkonda village, Khariabat Pada, we saw that the settlement was actually belonging to the government, and they had allocated lands according to the places that they cultivated. So ownership is still not there, is what we saw. Uh, so what happened is that all of these lands, due to getting codified, this then Portuguese and the affluent classes, the newly converted Christians, they took over this land through bribery, through lobbying, through other fraudulent activities. They took over these land. So now the only source of their revenue, their subsistence, was lost by the tribals. Now they did not have the forest areas to themselves. They only could farm for a single produce, which could not subsist. They could not subsist themselves on just this. So this became a major issue. And when Portuguese left, when socio-economic development was started by the new government post liberation, uh, this issue persisted. Though they did recognize that land was something that was much needed, land rights had to be recognized, but since they did not have any records, so they could not actually provide individual rights to the people. So again, what happened was that there was a confluence of many factors. This problem with, because government was also trying to preserve and reserve the forests. So as a result of this, there was an unseen effect that the people who could actually lobby could get to like cut the trees off, and for business, if they, for the business purposes. But these people were actually some who practiced shifting agriculture, was seen as something which could damage the environment or something. So they could not, these are the people who were actually suffering because of all of these issues. So even the government's policies was actually having an unseen effect on them. With then also came the Forest Rights Act of 2006, which is again aimed to uh, protect, give the tribal community, the original tribal community, and the original tribal forest dwellers the right to sustain and live on the agriculture, the forested lands. But what we are seeing on ground is that in Goa, in July, the FRA Act has been started from I think July 2012. Since 2012, there has till now some 10,000 cases have been registered, 10,136 claims under FRA Act, but only 485 beneficiaries are received. And according to a very recent article by Navhin Times, I guess, they are still demanding for more extension to fulfillment of FRA rights. So ultimately, what we are seeing is they're still not getting their constitutional rights even after they have the ST status. The land issue is something which is pertinent because this is linking all the issues together. The issue of employment as well, because they are someone who are skilled in agriculture, who are skilled in making agricultural tools. And now when we come to now, they can only offer unskilled laborers to other plantations. They do not have they do not have any employment guarantee as well. They work as daily wage workers from what we saw, or in cashew plantations. Even the land that they are cultivating, as we saw in the in Sangam, the village we went to in Sangam, that the groundwater is so low right now that all this agricultural land, the irrigation water is not being able to reach those lands. So they have all abandoned these lands and they go to cashew plantations to work. So these, they cannot even work on these lands and cultivate for themselves. Their employment guarantee is lost. And this is basically linking all the issues, contemporary issues together, the issues of the issues of literacy as well. Though Goa has a higher literacy rate than the tribals in Goa have a higher literacy rate than any other state, around like literacy rate is very high, around 80%. And most of the youth is actually at least matriculating, if not graduating. So even the youth is, the youth is out migrating, or the youth is out migrating, or migration is happening from India to abroad. Like as Advocate John Fernandez and in TRI as well, they are doing a research on migration patterns. So they told us that they are migrating abroad to look for jobs. So this is something that is pertinent as a contemporary issue, that we have to secure, we have to fast track the FRA registrations. There is still no community forest rights. Again, as we have seen that these people are mostly community tribes, or mostly communities. We only have individual forest rights and not the community forest rights. So this becomes a very pertinent issue, and something that something that is linking all the contemporary issues together.
When we met all the political, all the activists, all the tribal leaders, one thing we realized is on the first day when I asked a few of them that is there any differences among the tribes themselves, most of them answered that they live peacefully together. But by the end of the second day, when I was questioning the tribal leaders with different ethnicities, like some of them were Catholics, we understood there somewhere that now they have differences, as with the time that there was an influx of the religion among them. Now tribals are not like when we passed, like when we you asked Bhavika how do they give the tribal status. One of the necessities that the tribals uh, like they have some properties. One of them is that the tribals do not have a religion which follows a hierarchy, and there is no distribution of there is no caste system among them. So even in the tribes of Goa, there was no particular, like they did not follow any god particularly. They were more of animistic religion followers. They used to pray the nature. However, with time, with different invasions, with different encroachment, even with Indian kings or the Portuguese, there was influx of religion of Hinduism. There was really influx of Catholicism. So that divided the tribes among themselves. Now it could be observed as because when the Portuguese converted most of the tribes, now they guaranteed some kind of protection or benefits to them. So the Catholics somewhere they were the front runners in terms of development before the other tribes, because they had some kind of protection from the Portuguese. However, we cannot say due to that they were treated really well, because as Advocate John Fernandez told us that most of the Gaudas which were Catholics were not allowed to even sit in the churches. They were asked to be out of. They were not allowed to be like to be a priest or anything. But they still had the accessibility to infrastructure, to education. So they were better off somewhere in that. However, he insisted that they were not better off than the Hindu Gaudas, because they were not getting the accessibility to the schemes which were given to the Hindu Gaudas. However, I asked him this question particularly: how does it think that how are they better? How are the Hindu Gaudas better off than them if they are behind them like 40 years or 50 years? Uh, he mentioned that also that the Catholic Gaudas, a lot of the youngs, that the one of the main issues among them was alcoholism, migration. A lot of them wanted to be associated with the higher class. This shows the indicators that they are somewhere in front of the other Gaudas. So also when we spoke to Mr. Devidas Bade, who was a journalist, he also mentioned the same problems, that the tribes among themselves are not, that the government should have some kind of a targeted policy here, that they should target the people, like the particular, when we observe the differences among the north and south Goa, we observe that the north Goa has more of a urbanized tribe, even though we cannot say that they are living in really good conditions. Even they, a lot of them were literates. The first village we went, most of them were graduates, but we still saw that there was an uh, absence of toilets there. There was still open defecation there, even though most of them were graduates and everything. So when we went to South Goa, the condition was really worse. We could not go to a lot of primitive places where, because they were situated on hinterlands and we did not really have the time. But as much as we could understand from all these leaders, we understood that the situations there are really worse. There are no hospitals nearby for 10 kilometers. There's no accessibility to education or to basic needs. So there are differences among among the tribes themselves. Now, now after this, we would like to comment on the reflections and conclusions we got from the tribes, from the whole trip. We met a lot of political leaders. One of them was Mr. Sadanand Gowde. Now he was a folklore singer, also conveyor of the government policies towards the tribal communities. He was really aggressive and passionate about speaking about the problems of the tribes. He was criticizing the government a lot here. Like he was criticizing the BJP government, the Congress government, that everyone's in, when we speak about Goa, most of them speak about the development in terms of the tourism. Nobody spoke about the issues of the tribals here, because the tribals built a lot of things there. But the only development was in terms of tourism. They spoke, he was very passionate about all the problems of tribes, where there were displacement of the tribals were asked to be leave the places. There was displacement issues, there were land issues, there were issues of illiteracy and a lot others. um, we also met Mr. Govind Shirodkar, who also instigated on the same topic. I would also like to, uh, fo- uh, I would also like to highlight that when we went to the Tribal Research Institute, which was also partnered by the DESA institution, they had five major projects going on, which mostly focused on the cuisine and culture of Goa tribes. And when we asked them about what about the literacy and about the issues of the tribals, they did not really have solid answers for that. So we understand that uh, there is some kind of space left between the government and there's always been friction among the tribes and the government. So even with today's, when we met the Tribal Research Institute, we understood the same thing, that the government is still trying to use the tribes as a selling point for tourism here. This is what we could infer from when we met the administrative offices at the TRI. Now, we also had Murray accompanying us, who is a student exchange uh, student this sem. So she would be speaking about some of the reflections she inferred from the trip.
Hello everyone, I'm Marie and I'm from Germany, an exchange student, and I'm super thankful to you and to Professor Bansode for this opportunity of that field trip. And I also want to give a special thank you to Tejas and Tanya and Bavika organizing the whole trip, for the accommodation and also for the transportation. So I think this is very important to mention. So I will just summarize some of the uh, things I understood during the trip and I also found very interesting and new to me. So first, before the trip, we read a lot in the literature which said that the tribals were mostly in agriculture, but we were observing mostly that they were working already in the industry or in service sector, and that was partly due to the low water supply for the irrigation, but also mostly the tribals have like very small farms, which turns out to be not very profitable for cash cropping in the end. And also the issue of formal land titles was very bad, as mentioned before, and also I think one part which was also very shocking to me was that the tribals were influenced by the hierarchy and the religion, which was oppressed on them. And especially that part about the Catholics shocked me, because me as a Christian standing for equality and equity think that it's so bad that they converted to Catholicism and then in the end couldn't even like go to church or had to sit in the last row. Yes, another part I wanted to mention is that I think this year is a special year for India with the election. And I think, especially thinking about what we heard about how politicians and officers talk about what they will do about the tribals, what can they do for them. And we go there and see nothing has happened, they only do publicity, so please. But in the end, I was surprised and happy to see that mostly there was a lot of education available, especially primary education, but also in the first village we visited, there were most of the people graduated even, and also the access to primary health care centers. I mean, they were not close, but they were available. So this was also very good to see, although we have to like recognize that we didn't go as far in the outside as.
Thank you. This was us. Now we are open to questions. If anybody in the audience uh, would have any questions for us.
Well as deforestation has influenced the lives of the tribals and which particular community?
Uh, so, sir, the mining was banned after a point, and it's still banned. It's still in the High Court case. It's not yet resumed. So, uh, there was a there were agitations against the mining because it was causing the displacement for of the tribes. It was mostly for the because the Kunbis and the Waves were staying in like the lands which were on the uh, in the yes, so it was close to mine, so they were displaced mostly there. They were offered they were offered as laborers there, but we also heard about the story which was so there was this where these people were offered wages for some kind of labor, and then they illegitimately taken their signs, and then the place was given for industrial and mining activities. Which tribes? It was mostly Kunbi and Phillips because they were the ones staying. Also, it's now uniform. The Gaudas also stay in most of the places, so it's not particularly one tribe. The three of them are in the same quotient here.
So there's been a lot of fragmentation of these tribals, especially because of mining on one hand and protected areas increasing in size on the other.
Mm.
So they are also being displaced from the protected area.
Mm.
So is there any cumulative effect of mining and their displacement of their land?
Uh, what we observed here was when the the government was reserving some kind of land for as a forest reservation places like for nature preservation. However, the tribals were displaced from there. They were said to be also the reason for deforestation. However, the government was also practicing deforestation the same way. So they were promised a forest rights act, but they still did not get. There is a really small fraction of them which received the rights.